Big Bear, where he got it stuck and set it on fire. The San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department conducted an extensive 6-day search for Dorner in the Big Bear area, using both personnel on the ground as well as fixed-wing and helicopter assets in the air. During the 6-day search, the Sheriff's Aviation Unit ensured a rescue ship staffed with advanced life support medical personnel would be available in case the public or Sheriff's personnel were injured by Dorner.
On Tuesday, February 12, 2013, at about 12:22 hours, Sheriff's Dispatch received a 911 call from a Big Bear resident, Karen Reynolds, advising she and her husband, James Reynolds, had been held captive and tied up by Christopher Dorner. Mrs. Reynolds further reported Dorner fled in an unknown direction in their 2011 maroon Nissan Rogue. 2 minutes later, Sheriff's Dispatch broadcast the information regarding the Reynolds to all available units in the Big Bear area. Numerous law enforcement officers from throughout the county began receiving information about the home invasion robbery and responded to the Big Bear area to assist in the manhunt. On Tuesday, February 12th, Air Rescue 305 was staffed by Pilot Corporal Randy Gerwig, Crew Chief Sergeant Daniel Fucher, Dr. Michael Gerges, and paramedics Bradley Atkins and Shane Donnelly. Patrol helicopters immediately responded to the area to assist ground units searching for the vehicle. AR 305, stationed approximately 30 miles west of Big Bear, lifted off to reposition to Big Bear Airport in case anyone was injured or wounded during the subsequent search. Deputies Paul Franklin and Shane Hollins were working as partners, searching for Dorner in the Big Bear, Barton Flats area. Franklin received a call on his cell phone from a citizen. The citizen informed Franklin he had been carjacked at gunpoint by a black male adult wearing a tactical-style vest and carrying a rifle. Although the citizen did not identify the suspect as Dorner, Franklin believed the suspect was possibly Dorner. The citizen also told Franklin he heard gunshots on Glass Road moments after being carjacked. The gunfire heard was later determined to be an exchange between Dorner and Fish and Wildlife officials in the area of Glass Road and Highway 38.
AR 305, monitoring radio traffic, heard that Dorner had exchanged gunfire with forestry personnel during the carjacking of a second vehicle off Highway 38 near Glass Road. Anticipating that they might be needed, AR 305 diverted to that area to assist with the search. When deputies and Fish and Wildlife officers arrived at the scene where the citizen had been carjacked, they discovered the stolen and crashed Nissan Rogue. Deputies Paul Franklin, Shane Hollins, Jeremy King, Alex Collins, detectives Michael Siegfried and Jeremiah McKay drove northwest on Glass Road in an attempt to locate Dorner, while Fish and Wildlife officers remained with the vehicle to preserve the scene for evidence. Franklin and Hollins discovered fresh tire tracks in snow leading down the driveway of a cabin located on Seven Oaks Road. Franklin and Hollins stopped their patrol vehicle and exited a short distance west of a cabin. Siegfried parked behind Franklin Hollins' vehicle, and McKay parked behind Siegfried's vehicle along the north side of Seven Oaks Road facing west. King and Collins pulled their vehicle onto the south side of the roadway in the eastbound lane and stopped slightly west of McKay's vehicle.
At approximately 13:23 hours, while Franklin was explaining the newfound tire impressions, rapid-fire shots were fired at the deputies from an unknown location. Franklin, Hollins, King, and Siegfried ran west and took cover behind the vehicles. King and Siegfried took cover behind Siegfried's patrol unit, and Franklin and Hollins took cover behind Franklin's patrol vehicle. Both the patrol helicopter and Air Rescue 305 rushed to the ambush site on Glass Road. McKay and Collins began running to take cover behind a Dodge Durango. Collins was almost immediately struck by gunfire and fell to the ground near the rear driver's side corner of the Durango, exposed to Dorner's line of fire. Hollins broadcast on the radio that shots were fired and an officer was down. Deputies could not tell exactly where the gunfire was coming from. The gunfire was much quieter, most likely suppressed, than the return fire from the officers, and was in rapid succession, probably fully automatic. Since they didn't know where Dorner was firing from, and in an effort to keep Dorner from advancing on their position, Siegfried and King began firing multiple rounds from their Ruger Mini 14 rifles in a northerly direction for suppression fire.
At approximately 13:24 hours, McKay was positioned near the left front side of the Durango, lying in a prone position, firing from a rifle in the direction of the main cabin. McKay directed air support through the use of his handheld radio and changed shooting positions. McKay changed from a prone to a kneeling, crouching position and rose up slightly toward the left fender hood area of the Durango. McKay was crouching and aiming his rifle over the hood of the Durango, attempting to use the vehicle's engine block and fenders for cover. At about that moment, a second volley of suppressed automatic gunfire came from the direction of the cabin. Several rounds struck the Durango. Detective McKay was struck in the neck and succumbed to his injuries almost instantly. After McKay was struck, deputies began yelling as second officer was down. Immediately after hearing Hollins and Franklin broadcast there were shots fired and deputies down at the location, Deputy Daniel Rosa, Detectives Larry Lopez and Chad Johnson arrived on scene. Rosa, Lopez, and Johnson met up with Franklin, Hollins, Siegfried, and King. They positioned themselves slightly west of the cabin occupied by Dorner. Johnson and Lopez heard what they believed to be suppressed gunfire coming from the cabin north of their location. In response, Johnson and Lopez returned fire with their rifles at the south-facing windows of the cabin occupied by Dorner.
Almost simultaneously, Sergeant John Charbonneau arrived on scene with Deputy Justin Musella and Detective Kelly Craig. Charbonneau parked his unit to the east of the main cabin where Dorner was shooting from, exited, and took cover behind a large tree north of his vehicle. Charbonneau saw an injured deputy, later determined to be Alex Collins, lying in the roadway, as well as deputies who were pinned down behind vehicles west of him. Charbonneau began firing suppression fire towards the east side of the main cabin in an attempt to prevent Dorner from continuing to fire at the deputies pinned down in the roadway. With an ongoing gun battle, AR-305 looked for a landing zone near the downed deputies to get them on board. The area was a dense forest with numerous tall pine trees. The closest landing zone AR-305 located was near an intersection approximately a quarter mile east of the scene and extremely confined. Corporal Gerwig began a steep, complex approach as Crew Chief Pusher and Paramedic Adkins guided him down. Feeling the tremendous pressure of two deputies down, as well as being Gerwig's first flight rescue, he was able to accomplish a very complex and technical approach and landed at the landing zone.
Now on the ground, the entire crew was willing to exit and assist with the injured deputies. Kutcher, Gerges, and Atkins exited the aircraft and began making their way toward the ambush site, while Gehrig and Donnelly stayed with AR-305. None of the crew had body armor, and both Atkins and Donnelly, being citizen volunteers, were unarmed. The crew believed the suspect would appear out of the wilderness to engage the aircraft after seeing them land. Kutcher, Gerges, and Atkins were able to find a U.S. Forest Ranger who began to drive them toward the ambush site. After a few seconds, Deputy Musella realized he needed to reposition himself to throw smoke canisters to conceal the downed deputy's location from Dorner. Musella coordinated with Charbonneau to provide cover fire for him, while he, Musella, ran across 50 yards of open ground to a building just east of Dorner's location. Musella did this knowing full well he was exposing himself to the suspect who had already shot two deputies. Musella successfully took a position at the southwest corner of the building and threw his first canister of smoke. The canister landed short and was ineffective in concealing the downed deputies. Musella quickly threw another canister of smoke and this deployment was more successful in concealing the positions of the downed deputies. At his position to the west, Rosa saw that Musella had deployed smoke canisters and decided to augment his deployment by throwing additional smoke canisters. He retrieved canisters of smoke from his unit and deployed one canister. The additional smoke provided excellent concealment for the downed deputies. Rosa and Lopez then took on the responsibility for rescuing McKay and Collins as Johnson provided additional cover fire. Lopez ran to McKay's location and dragged him behind cover. Rosa then ran to Collins' location and dragged him to safety behind cover, while Johnson and Lopez provided cover fire. Deputies Hollins and Jeff McDaniel then loaded McKay and Collins into a unit, and they were driven to the landing zone to be airlifted. After making sure both McKay and Collins were safely loaded into the vehicle, Rosa, Johnson, and Lopez returned to their positions in order to maintain a proper perimeter and prevent Dorner's escape.
With an intense gun battle still being waged, deputies were not able to take the wounded deputies to AR-305's location and asked the crew to find an alternate landing zone. Futcher, Burgess, and Atkins returned to the aircraft. AR-305 departed, and the crew began searching for a second landing zone west of the ambush site. Due to the terrain, the nearest landing zone was approximately 2 miles to the west. The second landing zone was also very confined. Again, Corporal Gerwig made a very precise approach to the roadway. The crew worked with ground units to carry the 2 downed deputies to the aircraft and began assessing their wounds and providing treatment. Corporal Gerwig executed a difficult departure from the confined area and flew the 2 wounded deputies to Loma Linda Medical Center while updating that trauma center of the aircraft's pending arrival. As additional SWAT personnel arrived at the Seven Oaks Road cabin scene, Dorner became completely surrounded. Despite demands for his surrender, Dorner held his ground, unaffected by the introduction of chemical agents. The cabin eventually caught fire from the chemical agents, and in a last act of defiance, the suspect took his own life. The actions of all the sheriff's personnel involved reflect a high level of training, skill, teamwork, and bravery under extremely dangerous circumstances. They all remain steadfast to their responsibility to place the public safety ahead of their own, bringing a stop to Christopher Dorner's 9-day reign of terror was heroic.
Tragically, Detective Jeremiah McKay could not be saved, and Deputy Collins was critically injured after being hit 5 times. If not for the willingness of the flight crew of AR-305 to move toward danger to help their own, and Corporal Gerwig's superb piloting skills, the outcome could have been even more tragic. Ladies and gentlemen, receiving the Sheriff's Medal for Meritorious Service, Deputy Paul Franklin. Receiving the Sheriff's Medal of Valor, Sergeant Daniel Futcher. Retired Corporal Randy Gerwig. Reserve Deputy and Dr. Michael Gerges.